Are you doing it too, Dan?
Yeah, I think I just did it.
No?
Yeah.
Okay. So welcome, everyone. This is the Path of Awakening Buddhist Center class. And we've been working our way, for those of you who are new tonight, through Charlie Rinpoche's book, Mind at Ease, which is about Mahamudra meditation. And we are about to finish. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Welcome, everyone. I remember attending a teaching once by Trungpa Rinpoche, where he began by saying, I only know a very little. And I certainly did not feel that was true of him, but in my case, it's definitely true. I want to always find it interesting to study material that's describing things that are really beyond my experience. And yet it's helpful to study them because they help us to begin to recognize things that we might experience even briefly that becomes extremely important to recognize, in fact, in our experience. And I think that's really the point in all of these teachings of Mahamudra, that what we're really working toward is beginning to develop a sense of what it is to recognize the true nature of our minds, which is what Mahamudra is all about. In a very important way, the Mahamudra practice is really about simplicity, particularly simplicity in the practice of meditation itself. That when, for instance, we're told that through the practice of meditation, all kinds of things that we might experience are self-liberated, that we don't need to do anything to create better thoughts or to do anything to push away or stop or eliminate things that we might think are a problem, that simply by remaining in awareness, remaining in nowness, that these problems dissolve of their own accord, is actually a fairly profound teaching on a lot of levels. We talked last week about the fact that the main reason that we don't recognize the true nature of our mind is from the point of view of the Vajrayana and in the Mahayana as well, that we're obscured by what are considered adventitious stains, habitual patterns, fixations, ways of thinking and looking at things that are mistaken, misperceptions. And that this is why self-liberation is a possibility, because they're not innate in us. They're not inherent. They're not like indelible stains that can never be removed. It doesn't mean that they can't cause a great deal of confusion and suffering, but at the same time, it is possible for them to be self-liberated. And it's really that simplicity of Mahamudra meditation that's, paradoxically, is the very simplicity that's difficult because we're habituated to everything else, starting with immediate reactions and feelings about things that we think are good or bad, and then acting on those. And all of those things, and from a certain point of view, you could say, first of all, solidify whatever it is that we think is good or bad. Gives it a sense of entity or thingness that's completely a creation of mind. But secondly, also betrays a certain mistrust in our inherent wakefulness, our inherent goodness. That in fact, if we're able to just sit and be with our experience, these things do self-liberate. So there are a lot of things in this teachings, in this book, that I find are actually really important to contemplate and consider what they mean in terms of our experience, what they mean in terms of our practice, and what they mean in terms of our study. I want to begin actually talking about we're going to be talking mainly about the last two of the four yogas of Mahamudra tonight, but I want to actually begin with a quote from the end of the book, end of the chapter, where he says that ultimate reality, which is Mahamudra, must be distinguished from the words and labels employed to describe it. As far as the true condition of things is concerned, nothing can be identified as this or that, for the simple reason that reality is not an entity. Not an entity, meaning it's not a distinguishable, single, fixed, independent thing. This does not mean that traces of that reality can't be intimated through the use of words and labels. The role of language is like a finger pointing to the moon. While the finger can never be the moon itself, without its guidance, we may never know that the moon is in the sky at all. In the same way, only through employing relative techniques, such as the use of language, can we realize enlightenment. Ultimately, it's the sharpening of our intellect that leads us to acquiring intuitive wisdom. Intuitive wisdom meaning the ability to recognize our true nature, reality just as it is. So again, I just want to emphasize again the point that ultimately Mahamudra is really about simplicity. The complexity comes from the complexity of our mistaken mind, the ways in which we believe things to be true, perceive things to be true that are mistaken. So just to briefly recap, last week we talked about the first two yogas, excuse me, the first two yogas of Mahamudra. The first one was one-pointedness, which, as he says, relates directly to meditative experiences of mental lucidity and tranquility. So with this, we should actually begin thinking about our actual meditation practice and what we experience. Mental lucidity, just clarity, just knowing. Tranquility, just a sense of peace, a sense of steadiness, a sense of being settled, a sense of being able to simply let go into the present moment. And these are experiences that I think we've all had in meditation practice. We can have them in daily life as well, because from the point of view of Mahamudra, that is the true nature of our mind. It's just that it is easier to recognize under certain conditions than it is under others, especially in the beginning. In any case, one-pointedness, again, relates directly to meditative experiences of insight and tranquility, peacefulness, being settled. And it's really said that one-pointedness is when undistracted mindfulness of the abiding state of mind, undistracted awareness of the true nature of mind it becomes one-pointed. So it's talking about, as a yoga of one-pointedness, it's talking about what begins as perhaps very momentary experiences for most of us, certainly for me, but that then over time become longer and longer. We're able to sustain or rest in that nature without struggling. And again, remember that Mahamudra Shamatha, which is where we develop the steadiness and the stillness to begin to recognize this, really, again, emphasizes simplicity, talks a lot about the uncontrived state of mind, meaning that we're not trying to make something happen, we're just allowing what's already there to become open to us, to become available to us. And that ultimately, when we're able to truly rest in this abiding state of mind, that's one-pointedness. He says that experiences of bliss, or you could say well-being, clarity, lucidity, insight, whatever word you want to use, bliss, clarity, and mental spaciousness, which is sometimes used as a synonym for non-conceptuality, not being bound by conceptual thought, becomes an everyday occurrence. Again, it's one-pointed, that it becomes a fairly steady, stable occurrence in our life. And we begin to see their intimate relationship to the nature of reality or emptiness. And actually, throughout these yogas, we'll hear quite a bit about emptiness and how we relate to the notion of emptiness as an experience. And that's because there are actually a lot of different ways in the Buddhist tradition where emptiness is described, and a lot of different, I hate to use the word levels, but different stages maybe that through which we experience a sense of what emptiness truly is. He actually says at one point that it becomes a problem when we think of emptiness as meaning nothingness, because that's not really what it's about. But for instance, Khenpo Sotrim Gyamtso has a book, Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness, that begins with just the Hinayana discovery of the nature of egolessness and self, that there isn't a fixed identity, that in fact, who we are, what we feel, what we perceive is always in flux and always changing. And that's, for most people, our first experience of beginning to see emptiness, the lack of a singular, independent, permanent self. And that it then, it goes from there to deeper and deeper, more significant levels of emptiness, which relate to the yogas. One-pointedness also begins to signal, he says, the realization that all we experience, perceive, and conceptualize has no distinct reality independent of mind. So this is the beginning experience of non-duality, that whatever we experience, whatever we see, think, hear, smell, taste, touch, is all a projection, a creation, an experience of our mind. And that our ordinary conventional point of view that we exist here and that there's a world of external objects out there, certainly true relatively, but in terms of our actual experience, it is all one thing. It's all an experience of mind. And what that means and how we begin to contemplate that also takes on more and more significance as we go through the yogas. But in the beginning, it's simply that whatever we experience through our minds, or is an experience of our minds. And just as a summary point on the yoga of one-pointedness, he quotes Jie Shang. When the one-pointed stage dawns, one realizes the intrinsic nature of one's mind to be an unceasing stream of clarity and emptiness, devoid of any center and circumference, like the expanse of space, settled in serenity and lucidity. So with this beginning yoga, again, we develop a one-pointed, fairly steady experience of the nature of mind, or being able to rest in the true nature of mind, which is, again, just as he says, devoid of any center and circumference, like the expanse of space, settled in serenity and lucidity, and an unceasing stream of clarity and emptiness. So we could begin by thinking of, again, just our experience of awareness, however we experience that in meditation practice. And come to realize that our ordinary sense of awareness tends to be bounded by concepts, and that in fact it's much vaster and much more profound than we might ordinarily think. The second yoga is non-conceptuality, or more commonly in the Kagyu tradition, freedom from elaborations. And what he says here is once we're able to maintain a one-pointed state of mental equipoise, in other words, an even state of resting meditation where we experience the nature of mind directly, without craving it, so without attachment, without striving, again and again, the Mahamudra teachings on meditation emphasize the importance of relaxation, the uncontrived experience of mind, natural mind that's not created out of some kind of an idea or concept, but what we actually experience in the moment. So without craving it or becoming fixated on it. So those are two ways that our experience can become obscured by, again, adventitious stains. That once this happens, once we attain this one-pointed state of mental equipoise, we transcend the need to deliberately apply mindfulness. It becomes more and more just something, again, that happens naturally. And accompanying this is the realization that whether our mind is in a state of tranquility or agitation, more traditional teachings would talk about the settled mind and moving mind, but same idea, that both are expressions of the nature of mind. In other words, that both come out of the same basic fundamental nature of mind. And again, we might come to understand this in terms of our practice by seeing that we can rest in awareness even as thoughts come and go as just passing phenomena, that even as perceptions and feelings come and go as passing phenomena. It's very easy to jump in and with evaluative mind and say that, well, there are some I wish would stay longer and some I wish would depart more quickly. But that's an obstacle to the practice. The basic idea is we just rest in awareness and watch, see how things come and go naturally, which comes back again to having, developing some trust in this notion of self-liberation, that nothing ultimately is an obstacle. We realize that, he says, with this freedom from elaboration or non-conceptuality, we realize that discursive thoughts don't originate, abide, or cease to exist in any way we can pin down. That thoughts don't arise, abide, or cease in any way that we can directly pin down, which is, again, one way of coming to understand something of the nature of mind. In other words, the nature of discursive thought is revealed to be the same as the nature of mind itself. With this, our mind is free of the limitations imposed by our confused and erroneous thinking. So that's something to contemplate. Again, it's something that it's not so much that we can make this happen conceptually, but that by actually looking at our experience and coming to realize, again, the ephemeral, transparent nature of thoughts, that we come to understand that in a sense they are just expressions of the natural state of mind. Again, not getting caught, and I'm not talking about the content, I'm talking about the experience of passing thoughts altogether. The particular content in terms of relative reality may or may not have greater or lesser significance to us, but from the point of view of meditation, it's just seeing it all as passing phenomena that we neither engage with nor try to push away or stop. He says to do this, we first realize how perception of the outer world is conditioned by our mind, and then realize that the mind itself is also devoid of any enduring essence. In other words, and this again relates to our growing understanding of emptiness, that we begin to see how much of what we think something is really our projection onto things of labels and ideas and feelings and concepts of all kinds. We kind of have a sense of this, I think, just conventionally, but we begin to realize how pervasive this is through meditation practice, how much we don't experience the world directly, but we filter the world through concepts and ideas, and that we can become very attached to those. But here, again, our perception of the world is conditioned by our mind. And the more we look at mind, the more we realize that it itself doesn't have, again, any fixed entity, fixed sense of self. This could come even just from looking, who's doing the looking, who's the person who's looking at thoughts. And we realize that outside of the thought of looking, there really isn't any one thing that's there permanently or fixed in any way. And with this, he says, the mind is more like space than an entity of any kind. And with this, we begin to see things as they are, devoid of enduring substance, which is again a way of talking about emptiness. And the phenomenal world and emptiness are realized as undifferentiatable. So, in other words, we begin first to realize that everything we experience is an expression of mind. And the more we look, we realize that mind itself is empty, that there isn't a fixed entity that we can call mind. That's just an ongoing experience of, in its clearest sense, unobscured sense of, as we said before, an unceasing stream of clarity and emptiness, settled in serenity and lucidity, just in meditation practice. The notion of mind being like space is an interesting metaphor, because space is one of those things that we only really can define in reference to the things in space. So I'm in a room and I think of space as this place, but that's purely a relative concept. If we really think about space, space is vast and undifferentiated. And yes, there are all kinds of relative reference points that make space workable for us, manageable for us on a relative level. We have ways of measuring, we have sense of direction, we have objects in the world. But it's said that space pervades everything, but nothing really affects space. Whether there's literally a planet Earth in this particular orbit around the sun or not makes a huge difference to us. But from the point of view of space, it's totally unaffected by what's there or what isn't there. And things are constantly arising and subsiding in space all the time. There's an unceasing flow of phenomena. And in that sense, it's said that mind is like space. It can't really be pinned down as being in any one place. And yet within space, all kinds of things come and go, arise and subside. Sometimes a less vast analogy, although also vast, is the sky. And that the sky is all kinds of things arise in the sky: sun, stars, moon, clouds, rainbows. But the sky stays the same. So the sky is the basis of everything, and yet is unaffected by anything. And again, it's said that the mind is the same way. So again, an interesting thing to contemplate about what that means in terms of our experience. So the next of the 4 yogas, so we talked just briefly, review one-pointedness and non-conceptuality, or freedom from elaborations. Freedom from elaborations pointing particularly to ceasing to project or impute onto things ideas, concepts, labels, a sense of a fixed reality, so that that ceases to be. And again, with that, we have more direct experience, more direct perception of things. So with that, we come to the yoga of what Trallig calls one flavor, although most texts that I've seen call it one taste. And he says the yoga of one flavor arises when all dualistic concepts and all opposing things begin to have the same flavor, the flavor of emptiness. So again, we're talking about a much vaster, more extensive experience of emptiness, actually emptiness appearance. And in particular, when he says opposing things, that refers to, again, there are different ways in which the traditional teachings and philosophical teachings get at emptiness. But one is a sense of emptiness in the sense of what's called dependent imputation, where we project labels onto things. And if I were, for instance, a Madhyamaka teacher and I was trying to explain this, I might hold up a small stick and say, this is a stick. I'd hold up a longer stick and say, this is the long stick, this is a short stick. But then I pull up a third stick and say, now the stick that was the long one is the short one, and this is the long one. And we come to realize, anyway, the idea of that is to see how the mind projects labels onto things, long and short, that aren't inherent in the things themselves, but only exist in relation to other things. And that it's said that we do that conceptually with a lot of different things. And what's happening with the yoga of one flavor or one taste is, as he says, we begin to realize that even though there's a relative difference between long and short, it's not inherent in the things themselves. It's a projection of mind. May, again, be relatively useful, but in ultimate sense, doesn't really exist outside of that dependence of one thing on another. And that there are a lot of opposing pairs that exist because of their opposition, long and short, up and down. They say, well, how are up and down relative? Well, I remember reading one teaching where it said, well, we're based on where we are on this planet, up is that way. But if we were to go straight through the earth, the beings on the other side of the globe from us, what's up to us is down to them. And what's down to us is up to them. So again, it's dependent on relative conditions. And with the flavor of, with the yoga of one flavor, one taste, we become less bound to conceptual concepts. It doesn't mean that we can't use them in a relative way. As a matter of fact, in my experience, not personal experience, but people that I've observed who seem to have perhaps achieved this level of realization, they're much more precise in their use of concepts because they're not confused about the relative nature of things. In any case, he says the yoga of non-conceptuality, the previous yoga, arose with the dismantling of erroneous beliefs. But at this level, an adequate understanding of the phenomenal world and how it relates to reality is still absent. There's still some confusion, in other words, between relative and ultimate. At the level of one flavor, we no longer need to concern ourselves with the eradication of conflicting emotions and the cultivation of wisdom, because whatever arises is now perceived differently. And that's what's happened here. Because there's less confusion about emptiness and appearance, as he'll say in a little bit, I believe, actually, one is not seen as superior to the other. Because there's less confusion, we're not taking things to be real that aren't. We're not imputing things onto things that are a projection of our mind, but not really inherent in things, and yet we see them that way. If someone we don't like, we see them as fundamentally whatever we think they are, as opposed to just seeing it as a temporary appearance in mind, for instance. All of that is really cut through, or more importantly, let go of at this level. And as he says, this isn't the result of manufacturing our perception through techniques of any kind. It's developed spontaneously through practice. And what happens is our self-cognizing awareness, again, our awareness of the nature of mind, which increasingly, when it says self-cognizing, some translators have used the word reflexive awareness, but it's awareness being aware of itself, which is, I guess, you could say begins as something of a dualistic experience, but it becomes increasingly non-dual as we're able to really develop a sense of trust and identification with that. So self-cognizing awareness, which has arisen spontaneously, is able to engage all things in a state of equanimity. They go back and forth between equanimity and equality here, but the basic idea, again, is that realizing that whatever we experience is an expression of mind, and being less attached to concepts and labels means that there's more of a sense of equality in our perceptions of things, which doesn't mean everything is the same, except that everything is the same in the sense of appearance emptiness. And with that, there's less bias, I guess you could say, in our thinking and in our actions. Opposites, as he says, opposites are no longer perceived to be in conflict, like the long and short stick, for instance, but are recognized as being in a complementary relationship. He says the first stage is attained. This is, again, the 3 stages of yoga of one flavor or one taste, when we're able to perceive things directly, so that we see the thing itself, not, again, the long stick in relation to the short stick, but just the actual stick itself. So the thing that's perceived and the ultimate reality of emptiness are experienced as inseparable. We can say that ordinarily we don't perceive emptiness, because we tend to take the things that we see and the things that we project and the things that we believe as being real and solid and independent and permanent and so on. Or if we do, it's because we go through some kind of conceptual process. It's as if we made it empty, but in fact we didn't make it empty. It was empty to begin with. We just untangled some of our confusion about it. As I said before, at this stage, emptiness isn't perceived as superior, and the phenomenal world isn't perceived as subservient, that they're perceived as complementary or having the same nature, the appearance emptiness. And along with this, at this stage, we've really worked through a sense of us being here and an external world out there separate from ourselves. The self, the world, and the mind are experienced as a state of total unity, that because they all have the same nature, that it's one flavor, one taste. And he says at the beginning, this might be more of a conceptual understanding, but as we work through this, begin to realize more and more, this is actually how things are. He talks about some obstacles that might be experienced at this stage of the path, particularly a subtle sense of nihilism, where we feel that what we do is, because it's all relative anyway, isn't meaningful, which he says is actually quite dangerous. Or says it can turn into a blithe disregard for the feelings of others. And that's why he says at this point it can be really important to do compassion practices like Lojong, Tonglen, or the 4 immeasurables. But the important thing at the second stage is more and more we become to realize that the perceiver and perceived are interdependent, that they're not independent of each other. Ultimately, that's the ultimate sense of, you could say, of reconciling opposites, perceiver and perceived. It's 2 different things, are no longer seen that way. As he says, dualistic fixation on perceiver and perceived is the cause of much distress and confusion. And he really went into this in the earlier chapters, where he talked about how our tendency to believe certain things are the way they are then lead to klesha activity, where we try to bring in the things that we perceive as desirable, aggressive behaviors to the things that we think are not, and ignorance to the things that we don't care about or don't seem significant to us at the time. Maybe later become something different. But that it's because of dualistic fixation that we get caught in that kind of struggle with the world. He says ultimately the yoga of one flavor marks the realization that because everything that exists within the realm of samsara and nirvana has its origin in emptiness, it exists within a state of equanimity. And again, quotes a verse in this that I actually wanted to read. This is on page 219. When the one flavor stage dawns, one will cognize the characteristics of mind. One is clear, in other words, about the nature of mind and begins to see through dualistic mind. When the one flavor stage dawns, one will cognize the characteristics of mind. One will realize that the diverse things of samsara and nirvana arise from the mind's non-discriminatory dharmakaya. All things that arise, all things that we experience or come out of this experience of the nature of mind. Appearance and absence of appearance, stability and absence of stability, emptiness and absence of emptiness, clarity and absence of clarity are all of one flavor in the luminous dharmakaya. So a pretty profound level of experience we're talking about here. And the final stage of experience, non-dual wisdom, is totally overcome any sense of perceiver and perceived, apprehender or apprehended, as it is in some texts, I and other, as any kind of confusing duality. And he says when we attain the third stage, we acquire non-dual wisdom and begin to perceive the world as magicians perceive their own creations. That's actually an interesting metaphor that I've read about in terms of understanding how perceptions change with the realization of emptiness. The idea of how magicians perceive their own creations is that if you know how, for instance, if you know how to do a magic trick, or if you know how a magic trick is done, you'll see the same things that anybody else would see, but you'll experience it very differently because you know how it's done. So you begin to see through the illusion that's created by all the causes and conditions that a magician sets up. And yeah, you'll see the exact same thing as somebody who has no idea how the trick is done. Suddenly a card appears out of the deck that shouldn't be there. How did that get there? Or somebody floats in the air, whatever the magic trick. But your experience of it is very different because you know what it is, and you understand that it's an illusion that comes out of causes and conditions. And it's that type of change in perception that becomes manifest at this level of yoga of one flavor. It does say there's still some subtle obstacles, but basically the important thing is that with this, that the importance of the phenomenal world is brought back into focus. So with this, in other words, with the yoga of one flavor or one taste, there's no fear of anything in our experience. There's no conceptual grasping or conceptual pushing away. For that matter, he says, the fundamental difference between the yoga of non-conceptuality, that second yoga, and this third yoga of one flavor, is that in the former, we had not yet developed the ability to regard whatever arises in the mind as complementary to our meditation and spiritual growth. So at this point, with this yoga, because whatever we experience isn't an obstacle, that as it says in the I Ching, everything works to further, that everything becomes part of the practice. Everything becomes a reminder or an experience of awareness and openness. And he says that sometimes this is referred to as the path of effortlessness at this point, because we've reached a pretty advanced state. But the real obstacle at this point is some feeling that meditation and non-meditation are the same, and then believing there isn't a need for further practice. That's the obstacle or the risk at this level, is to begin to believe that meditation practice isn't necessary. But still, he says, with this yoga, the yoga of one flavor, one taste, because of this sense of equality or equanimity, because of this complete recognition of the empty nature, appearance, emptiness nature of things, we've developed the ability to use the phenomenal world itself as manure for the cultivation of wisdom. Whatever we perceive about the phenomenal world becomes an extension of our meditation practice. So with this, we enter the final yoga, which is called non-meditation. which he says is characterized by a sense of well-being or bliss, irrespective of whatever we're experiencing, and that even when we're not formally practicing meditation, we remain continuously in a meditative state. Whatever happens to us externally or internally, we're in a continuous state of meditation. There's an interesting little piece here about a shift in the experience of luminosity, where he says that there are two types of luminosity, temporal and innate. That the temporal type of luminosity can be cultivated over time through meditation practice and is termed sun luminosity. But the innate luminosity, which is the natural luminosity of the true nature of mind, is identified as natural, as mother luminosity. And as we give rise to the different levels of these four yogas, these two types begin to merge until they become indivisible, like the ocean and its waves. The interesting thing about that is the meeting of mother-sun luminosity is precisely the point at the moment of death, where if we actually recognize that what we're experiencing is our own mind, we can become enlightened on the spot. So this is obviously a very profound, very significant experience. In any case, he says it's the merging of these two types of luminosity that brings the actualization of Buddha's being. He says, with this experience of non-meditation, we're in a meditative state regardless of circumstances, that obstacles in the form of conflicting emotions cease to have any impact, he says nothing is hidden, that the unconscious has been transformed into primordial wisdom. He says that the second stage of this yoga is attained through establishing oneself in the indivisible state of samsara and nirvana, which is simultaneously established in emptiness. In other words, we begin to realize there is no difference between samsara and nirvana, that they're simply expressions or states of mind that we fall into either because of confusion or because of clarity and wisdom, and that there's really no difference. And that's why it says in the chant, grant your blessing so that I realize the inseparability of samsara and nirvana. What it's really talking about is reaching this stage of non-meditation. Again, where nothing is an obstacle to practice. Everything is continuous practice, 24-hour, 365 days a year meditation practice. And with this, there's a transformation of ordinary consciousness into wisdom consciousness. He says with this final yoga, there's absolutely no difference between meditative and post-meditative states. At this point, we've reached full enlightenment, and we're always in a state of meditation. And he says the term non-meditation simply means there's nothing to be meditated on. The term non-meditation simply means there's nothing to be meditated on. Or a slightly different, although similar interpretation is any object of meditation is seen to be utterly empty. So that, again, there's really nothing solid or definite that becomes an object of meditation. It says at this point, we've fully realized the Dharmakaya, or Buddha nature, and it's the product of insight meditation because of Vipassana, because that's the practice that enables us to cut through the conceptual web created by our erroneous ways of thinking. In other words, through Vipassana, we've totally cut through any kind of mistaken conceptions, let go of any kind of mistaken conceptions about ourselves, the world, and the nature of mind. He says the actualization of the Nirmanakaya is established due to the mastery of tranquility or shamatha meditation. And I think what he means by that comes in the next sentence. That through that, one attains the ability to work for the benefit of others without wavering from their own true condition. So again, that's the steadiness of shamatha practice. That there's no wavering from the true condition, the true nature of mind. He says that Mahamudra tradition regards all of this as possible within this very life. And this is where he says what I started in the beginning, that ultimate reality, which is Mahamudra, must be distinguished from the words and labels employed to describe it. That we use relative means such as language to point to the moon, but we have to recognize, begin to contemplate what these things mean in terms of our actual experience in meditation and in daily life. He says that Mahamudra is atemporal, in other words, it's beyond time, because it's uncaused. There's no cause for the nature of mind. That's in fact one of the realizations that comes about through Mahamudra meditation, that the true nature of mind, the fundamental awakeness, we're going to call it awareness, doesn't have any cost. It's not dependent on anything else. It doesn't come about through causes and conditions. Therefore, it doesn't cease. Which is what he says next. Because it's not an entity, it's not a fixed thing, that it is uncaused, it doesn't change, it has no fluctuation. And since it's devoid of conceptualization, it's free of evaluative concepts of good and bad, devoid of all characteristics of thinghood. And then he says, if this seems too remote to understand, remind yourself that this unadulterated wisdom, which comes about through this fruition of Mahamudra practice, is only to be found within the stream of our ordinary consciousness. It exists within the very consciousness that becomes agitated and confused and performs cognitive acts. To realize unsullied wisdom is therefore not to realize something other than the nature of your own consciousness, our own consciousness. There is nothing that can be attained that is extrinsic to our own mind. The very mind that we possess is no different from the mind of an enlightened being. And whether you realize Mahamudra or not is determined simply by how much you understand your own consciousness, your own mind. The mind that is unconditioned and left in its own natural state is Mahamudra, because this is the same mind as the luminous bliss of an enlightened being. So that's the conclusion of that chapter. Just as a little bit of an extra, I wanted to read just a little bit, if I have just a few more minutes, from a teaching by Tulku Ujin, who was a great meditation teacher, and like Trungpa Rinpoche, was both Kagyu and Nyingma. And in this, I'm just going to read some excerpts from something that he wrote. He uses the word Rigpa for nature of mind, which is usually more associated with the Atri tradition, but it has the flavor of Mahamudra as well. So for most beginners, Rigpa does not stay for a long time. It comes for a moment, and then you become distracted from it. It goes like this. You recognize it, then you stay with it for a very short time, then it finishes because you fall back into dualistic mind. Since it is that way, there is the instruction to recognize it for very short periods, but to do that many, many times. The instruction is like a slogan, short periods, many times. At first, Rigpa might only come for a few instants. You practice at staying with it, because of which the duration slowly lengthens to 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes. If you keep working with it, keep working at it, it will come longer and longer. Going to Buddhahood is like going from one side of a country to another. As you go, you will meet forests, then perhaps open plains, then perhaps mountains, then open plains, more mountains, and finally you will arrive at the other side. The journey to Buddhahood is up and down, sometimes with a clear approach and sometimes with a big obstacle in the way. Eventually, you might be able to stay in it for about an hour. If you manage to stay in Rigpa for an hour, it's said that you've reached the level of an arhat. If you can stay in Rigpa for half a day, then it's said you've reached the stage of a bodhisattva. And if you can stay in Rigpa for a whole day continuously, 24 hours without a break, then that is it. You are a Buddha. In that case, it is said that in one human lifetime, you've achieved the mind of a Buddha. So, I hope that's encouraging. It's certainly my experience that whatever I think I might have experienced is momentary. But I also will say that with practice, I don't know if I'm up to 2 minutes. I don't time it because it doesn't seem time. But in my experience, what he says is true, at least in the beginning. And so I hope that's encouraging to everyone, just as Trungpa Rinpoche says, it's this very mind, the mind that we already have, that we work with and that has this potentiality for wisdom. So at this point, turn it over to John for a little bit of conclusion, I guess.
You're muted, John.
Thank you, Michael. Let's just take a moment and practice a little bit of what this is all about. So if you take a good posture, it's always sort of helpful. A good straight back. Hands in whatever meditation mudra you like. You're in a chair, your feet are flat on the floor, and so on. We all know the drill here. Good meditation posture. And bring your mind right into this space. Here and now, just relaxed. Simple awareness. Not trying to do anything in particular. Resting, you might say, in whatever happens to be appearing. The sound of this voice, mine, the walls and windows that are around you, any tactile sensations, now that I mention them, your body, and of course there are mental events coming and going. This is the standard meditation. And this really is the doorway, or it is, if you wish, resting in Rigpa. The word for Rigpa in the Kagyu tradition is Tamogishepa, which is usually translated, especially if you're reading Profound Treasury, as ordinary mind. It's ordinary. It's just this, whatever happens to be appearing to you, any of the 6 knowables in this space. And we just rest here, effortlessly. Sometimes thoughts will come up like, am I doing it right? Have I really got it? Do I understand this? And they're just passing thoughts. And they come and they go and they disappear. And here we are, right where we're sitting. Our awareness is here in this space. This is the practice, to rest in this awareness, and as thoughts come up, not to actually engage with them and to believe them and to struggle with them, like, oh gosh, am I doing it right? Oh, I might be doing it wrong. Whatever those thoughts are, they just come and they go. They evaporate. They dissolve into this space. And here we are. It's like we're in the sky. And the thoughts that come up are just birds passing through. This is the practice. Sometimes we'll get lost in a thought. Like, I wonder what Rigpa is. Do I really understand it? And, am I getting anywhere with this? These kinds of self-doubt thoughts are really the fundamental essence of ego and of confusion, because they're all about I'm going to get it, I'm not getting it, I hope I'm going to get it, maybe I am getting it. And it's all about I, and it's full of self-doubt. And so it divides us between the me here and the rest of the world. We see them, these thoughts, they dissolve, just like these words are dissolving into space. And here we are, where we always are. Now, in this present moment, where everything is changing, accept the fact that it's here and now, that it's present. This is what's being described in these teachings of Mahamudra. And our practice is to realize that we're lost in a dream from time to time. The dream of, am I getting anything out of this? Am I truly a meditator? Whatever it might be. What's for lunch? Am I going to be happy with this lunch? And then suddenly you realize, oh, I've been lost in this story. I've been lost in this dream. And when you do, the dream evaporates and you're back. Back where? Here, wherever here may be. And then we'll go off again into some worry, some struggle about I and other, about making things better, which is confusion and samsara, until we realize, oh, I'm doing it again. I'm struggling, I'm lost in this dream of I and other, and we let it go. And here we are, floating, you might say, in this space of reality. This is the practice, to constantly become aware when we're lost in thought that we are lost in thought. And as soon as we're aware, there's nothing more to do. This is the teaching of self-liberation. Nothing more to do. All you have to do is realize, oh, I've been struggling, and it's there. It's self-realization, self-recognition. It's everything unwinds. It's like one of the analogies is like a snake being tossed into the air, and it just unwinds itself. As soon as we come back from whatever our dream is, realize that we're dreaming. As soon as we realize that we're dreaming about meditation, I'm dreaming about meditation. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? I, am I doing it? And there's this feeling of effort and struggle. And we let it go, we see it, and it uncoils all by itself, if only for an instant. And the more we do that, the more we begin to shift our loyalty from the struggle of good and bad, better and worse, making things successful or instead of unsuccessful. We shift our loyalty from that struggle to simply being awake, aware, which is so restful here, now. And if we say to ourselves, ooh, it is restful, but now I'm struggling again, I should give up the struggle. There it is again. We've polarized it. We've created a better and worse, and we see it and let it go. It's just a mental creation, a fabrication. And so these confusion, you might say, self-liberates as soon as we bring it to awareness. And we're back here in this space, this room, this time, this voice. This is the practice. This is what these teachings are all about. It's about living in almost two different worlds. The world of I and other, better and worse, accomplishment and failure. That's one world. And the world that is already here, right now, that we just relax back into it. It might be a little frightening at first. We're giving up our ground of here and there, better and worse, accomplishment and failure, progress and the lack of it. We're giving all that up, those reference points that tell us where I am on the path. And we're floating free in this space of the present moment, this space of awareness, where mind and body, there is no distinction, except maybe the color of the skin, the sensation of touching the cheek, but it's all in awareness, in Rigpa, in Tamagishepa. Rigpa is usually translated as insight or pristine mind is another translation for Rigpa. Tamagishepa, they're the same thing. I actually asked Tsoknyi Rinpoche if there was a difference between them. And he teaches Rigpa all the time. And he said, no. He said, the only difference is in how they're pointed out to the student. Rigpa is pointed out much more suddenly and violently. Tamagishepa is much more gentle and gradual. So maybe we're kind of getting a Tamagishepa type transmission through reading this book, these teachings, because it's gentle, it's gradual. We're not getting that kind of punch of, here's Ripa, wow, bang. So, chapter 11, which is entitled On the Spiritual Journey. He says, only by developing a correct view, a clear conception of our goal, which is what I was trying to do just then, can we steer in an authentic direction on the spiritual path. An authentic direction, a direction that isn't about achievement, it's about coming back to home, to where we already are. In order to embark on this path that leads to the luminous bliss of spiritual realization, luminous bliss. Why is it luminous? It's because we've given up thinking about doing it better or worse, and in letting go of those thoughts, the world emerges much more vividly and pleasurably, the bliss. And we gain an understanding, he says, of ultimate reality and our true condition. Ultimate reality sounds so grand, really. It's not. It's this, now, me, you. But we are here, and this is our true condition. It's not that we're going to suddenly become angels and fly through the sky. He says we must understand the path and what the journey involves. And the journey is a coming back, a letting go of trying to accomplish or achieve something we don't already have. We must be able to discriminate between what leads us forward and what leads to confusion and error. And it's the whole idea of achievement that leads to confusion and error. We must understand what deluded and enlightened mind are, what we need to overcome and what we need to cultivate, so we can steer a correct course. The correct course is constantly coming back, constantly relaxing, constantly letting go of self-criticism. Tim Rinpoche used to say, I've said this over and over again, that self-doubt is the Buddhist version of original sin. We're saying, oh, I haven't got it yet. There's self-doubt. Let it go. It's here already. All we have to do is acknowledge it. And then we can come up with ways of saying, well, I can't acknowledge it, so I'm just not there yet. It's like we're so habituated to self-doubt. And that's what needs to be let go, because it's false. It's not true. So love, compassion, and joy have to be experienced in an unperturbed way through equanimity. These are the four immeasurables. Love. Love for oneself, love for the world, compassion. Resonating with this beautiful world. Joy. Happiness. This is the third immeasurable. And the fourth is equanimity. Not getting caught up in the polarities of good and bad, better and worse, achievement and failure. Not getting caught up in those. Those are anti-equanimity. But we rest here. He says in the Mahamudra tradition, the notion of self-liberation is paramount. Self-liberation means you don't have to do anything. You just come back from the dream and see it, and it liberates, like that snake uncoiling in space. Through self-liberation, the conflicting emotions and discursive thoughts, by allowing them to simply arise and dissipate without any grasping or fixation, allowing them to arise, we just watch it and dissipate. By doing this, we transcend any spiritual requirement to renounce, purify, or transform them, which is full of you know what, that bad stuff that we have to renounce, purify, transform them. This is the stuff of evil. This is the stuff that makes people into slaves to the ideas of good and bad, better and worse. This is the unique, skillful means of path Mahamudra that inexorably leads to spiritual realization. It's so funny. All we have to do is come back from the dream, realize, oh, I've been lost in this dream of self-improvement or whatever it may have been. And boom, we're back. It unwinds, it dissipates, it uncoils into space, and it's gone. So in Mahamudra, we're returning to our true home that's already here. And we do it, maybe we only do it in glimpses at first, but those glimpses, the more we do it, short and frequent, that's the key. Short and frequent. We be kind to ourselves. We don't beat ourselves up by saying, oh, I can't do it for longer. There it is again. That's the self-criticism, self-doubt. He says, so ground and fruition Mahamudra are identical. And what that means is that where we are already and the fruition of the path, that is the fruition of the path. It's so ironic. We're going home. In other words, to realize our authentic state of being is to realize the fruition of the great seal of all-encompassing reality. The great seal is another translation of Mahamudra. Mudra can mean gesture, it can mean seal. And he says, to realize our authentic state of being, which is here now, is to realize the fruition of the great seal of all-encompassing reality. Still, we need to embark on the spiritual journey to discover all this because we are so habituated to self-criticism and the idea of self-improvement, and that we're going to make it better through a lot of effort, and then we're going to really get the goods. And that's what has to be worn out, overcome on the spiritual path. He says, we need to embark on the spiritual journey to discover all this. We're not there yet. Not Buddhas yet, because we're still believing in self-improvement, that we need self-improvement. Our minds are layered with defilements and obscurations to the extent that we can't even catch a glimpse of our original condition. But sometimes we can. We can. And to say that we can't catch a glimpse of our original condition of the true reality becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if you believe that, that gets in the way. So we need a spiritual practice, the Mahamudra meditation of tranquility and insight. That's shamatha and vipassana. Isn't it ironic? What we started with is the path to the end. He says, we need to integrate ground, path, and fruition Mahamudra. Ground is where we already are. Path is this practice of shamatha and vipassana, of peace and tranquility on the one hand, and insight, awareness on the other. And they merge so that we will eventually be Mahamudra. It's this, what we already are. The luminous bliss of Mahamudra is what represents our own true nature. We could even say that in our own true nature, we are Mahamudra. So there's another chapter. Let's see how we're doing on time. I'll do a little more here. This is chapter 11 on the spiritual journey. And this emphasizes the importance of this view that I've been talking about, of understanding, giving up self-improvement. He says, only by developing a correct view, a clear conception of our goal, what an ironic word that is, can we steer an authentic direction on the spiritual path. In order to embark on this path that leads to the luminous bliss of spiritual realization, we must gain understanding of ultimate reality and our true condition. See, as long as we're self-doubting ourselves and feeling that we have to improve ourselves, those thoughts gray the world out. They're very unhappy thoughts. They're saying, I'm not good enough. I'm just, I've got to try harder. I've got to improve myself. And those thoughts are so mean and they gray this world out. But when we begin to come and let them go and see the world in their absence, that's what is meant by luminosity. It's waking up. It's opening our eyes. It's taking off the sunglasses of confusion. Confusion is literally like a pair of sunglasses, only it does it to all our senses, ears, nose, everything. This luminosity is the beauty of the phenomenal world, seen without egotism, without good and bad, without feeling of struggle, of self-improvement. We must understand the path and what the journey involves. We must be able to discriminate between what leads us forward and what leads to confusion and error. And this is just what we've been talking about all this time. We need to understand what deluded and enlightened mind are. Deluded mind is the mind of, I'm going to get somewhere. Someday I'll get enlightened. That's deluded mind. What we need to overcome and what we need to cultivate so that we can steer a correct course. And we should engage in our spiritual pursuits with it and everything else with a sense of caring, love, compassion, as well as joy. That's so important, that we not be depressed. Otherwise, we will remain trapped in our conflicting emotions, which means our hatred, our passion, our jealousy, all of these things. So love, compassion, and joy have to be experienced in an unperturbed way. There it is again, the four immeasurables, what we chant every morning. May all beings enjoy happiness and the root of happiness. That's joy. That's love. May they be free from suffering and the root of suffering, compassion. May they not be separated from the great happiness, devoid of suffering. That's joy. May they dwell in the great equanimity, free from passion, aggression, and ignorance. And there's the fourth, equanimity. In the Mahamudra tradition, the notion of self-liberation is paramount. And what that simply means is that all we have to do is see that we're dreaming and not do anything further and let it go. Whenever you come back from the dream, it unwinds, it dissolves, if only for an instant, sometimes longer. The more you practice, the longer it goes away. Through self-liberating our conflicting emotions and discursive thoughts, by allowing them to simply arise and dissipate without any grasping fixation. There it is. That's what he says it right there. By allowing these conflicting emotions and discursive thoughts, by allowing them to simply arise and dissipate without any grasping or fixation. What we do is we have this thought, oh, I'm a terrible person. I'm not getting anywhere with this thought. And then we see it. And at that point, when we see it, we are no longer in it. We can let it go. Or we can climb right back in and keep going. And what we're being enjoined to do is simply allow it to arise and dissipate. And by doing so, we transcend any spiritual requirement to renounce, purify, or transform our thoughts. There are none. There is no requirement that we do anything with these thoughts and emotions. We just see them and they poof, dissipate into thin air. This is the unique, skillful means of Path Mahamudra that inexorably leads to spiritual realization. He says, and then so in Mahamudra, we are returning to our true home. So, in other words, to realize our authentic state of being, just this. It could be disconcerting because we feel like, well, what's the point? Where am I going with this? What am I going to get out of it? You aren't. In fact, I is going to disappear, much less all the plans and schemes and locations and purposes. I quote Trungpa Rinpoche. I was reading it to a friend of mine. When asked what the purpose of life is, he said, the purpose of life is to have no purpose. If you have a purpose, you just make a nuisance of yourself, to yourself and everyone else. And there it is. That's what this self-liberation of these concepts, inflicting emotions, is. We're letting all those purposes go. But that could be a little scary because we're dwelling then in purposeless space. And he says, still, we need to embark on the spiritual journey to discover all this. We're not there yet, not Buddhas yet. Our minds are layered with defilements and obscurations, to the extent that we can't even catch a glimpse of our original condition, or we can. So we need a spiritual practice, the Mahamudra meditation of tranquility and insight meditation. We will eventually be Mahamudra. We'll let go of the path of self-improvement and change. So finally, in a few more minutes, this appendix, the precious sun, he says, it's really, a lot of this is like the four reminders, reminding us, that this is all a precious opportunity. He starts out, he says, your body is borrowed and you will not possess it indefinitely. Boy, is that true. Especially for those of us who are getting old. I forget the name of the lady who told us she was 76 while I'm 78. And I want to say, he says here, make use of it, your body. Please turn your mind within and reflect on this. And it goes so fast. You thought it was taking a long time. And then suddenly you turn around and boom, 76, 78 years have gone. And your body's falling apart. He says, wholesome thoughts are intermittent, occasional. This is Padma Karpa, whom I never heard of before this, but it's fun. He says, come to your senses. Please turn your mind within and reflect on this. Come to your senses. That we have this precious opportunity to do what? To give up going anywhere, to come present. What an irony. Come where we already are. All conditioned things are impermanent. It is a mistake to be obsessed with acquisition. And how much do we do that? I was talking to a friend of mine today downtown Boulder, and he was watching this Maserati go by and wondering how much it cost. And he actually held up his phone to the car so that I could hear the, the engine. Yeah. Use your critical analysis to realize that the phenomenal world is like your dreams with no substance. The phenomenal world is like your dream with no substance. We put things on it. We say, yeah, I really like that. Oh, I love that ice cream cone. Oh, I love that Maserati. Oh, my body's getting old. It's all dreams. It's the concepts that we put on it. Temporary pleasures you may experience are fleeting, not a substitute for lasting happiness. And don't we all just indulge in those temporary pleasures, that great TV show, that wonderful bowl of ice cream, that terrific sex or whatever we may have had? He says, you can become a corpse at any time. Tomorrow, only your name will remain. Shouldn't you have fewer expectations about life? Please turn your mind within and reflect on this. This is all like the four reminders, right? It's just like an elaboration of it. It's terrific. When your time to die comes, you will leave behind your friends and relatives and any wealth you have accumulated. gate, gone. You have to depart from this world alone. Don't you imagine that you will be screaming in terror? Good, if you have no spiritual focus. And I reminded myself, I don't know where I read it, but the Dalai Lama, many years ago, I read a thing that he wrote about how he contemplates the descriptions of death in the bardo of dying, the painful bardo of dying. The bardo of dying begins at the moment that you contract a condition that's going to kill you. And it ends when both your body and your mind have shut down. And actually, it ends in that moment of luminosity that Michael described. Possibly, if you've trained enough to recognize it, the meeting of the mother and son luminosity. Most people haven't. They haven't trained enough. They're still lost in unhappy thoughts until the last moment when the mind shuts down and they're propelled into the next bardo. So the Dalai Lama wrote that he contemplates the description of death, and it's described as the falling away of the elements. First, as you're dying, earth. It's earth, water, fire, and wind, and then space, these four elements. And they fall away one by one. When earth falls away, you get a feeling of heaviness. You can't move. You're lying in your bed and you just feel so like you weigh a ton. And then when water comes, all of a sudden you feel fluidity in your body, like everything is melting and moving. And when fire comes, you feel a heat, like things are burning up, and then so forth. And he contemplates those, he said, every day, because he doesn't want to be frightened when he dies. Awareness. They say that in death, which is coming for us all, the great enemy is fear. The great savior, you might say, what saves us, is the awareness that's being described in these teachings. To be aware, to be awake right now. That is what saves you from the fear. He says your life force is like a dewdrop on the grass. It will vanish at any time. I'm going to cut to the end. He said, you should read this. It's like it's terrific. We are constantly seeking entertainment. What am I going to watch on TV tonight? Alone and with others. This will cause some to suffer and others to have their already inflated ego expand. And it just goes on like this. Padmakarpa, you become a slave to your desire to have a good, contented life and to your impulses. Isn't this an indication that your mind has not been tamed, he asks? Please turn your mind within and reflect on this, that we're a slave to our desires for entertainment. Why entertainment? Because it keeps the myth of I alive. I'm having fun. I'm relating to this. I'm relating to that. Even pain is a form of self-entertainment. He says, when you engage in study and learning, you get overwhelmed by laziness. When you make an effort to meditate, your mind is overcome by distractions. And then, suddenly, you want to become a spiritual teacher to others. And Michael, aren't your efforts overrated? Please turn your mind within and reflect on this, he says, Padmakarpa. Not realizing the sham you are, others shower you with respect, while inside yourself you have become a mad person, insane with the power and riches you have gathered. In this life, just pursuing your own personal security will never be enough. You need to bring about real fulfillment in your life. Please turn your mind within and reflect on this. Life is short, and there is so much to learn. I advise you to extract the essential points, then retire alone to meditate on them. Everything you experience about the world is contingent upon your mind. Everything. We walk down the street and we like this, we don't like that, we feel hungry, whatever we do. If you employ mindfulness consistently to tame your mind, coming back to a simple awareness, letting thoughts go, they just dissipate by themselves. then even if the whole world turns against you, it will not be able to harm so much as a tip of a hair upon your body. If you rest in mindfulness, awareness, coming back, letting thoughts and emotions self-liberate, seeing, oh, I was caught up in that jealousy. And as soon as you realize it, if you don't do anything, it just goes poof. When you analyze samsara and nirvana with the use of discriminating wisdom, which is what we're doing here, you will find there is nothing to be discovered. There is nothing to be discovered. Wow. He says this is known as the great insight. There is nothing to be discovered. We just let it go, and here we are. And we can, turn that into a discovery, we can say, oh, look at this purposeless, beautiful, self-arising, vivid, unconflicted world. And then we want to hold on to that. We turn it into something grand. So the point is awareness. See it. See it with clarity, compassion, freedom, which is joy, and equanimity. So I'll stop there. And we're almost completely out of time. We can have maybe 1 or 2 comments at most, and then we have discussion group tomorrow night. And we could talk about all this. We're going to skip next week. Again, skip class to give you time to buy the Bodhicharya Avatara, the Path of Awakening. What's it called exactly? The Way of the Bodhisattva, it's called, this particular version of it. And read the introduction. So we'll take 2 weeks to do that. And you can get it at Amazon or better Shambhala publications if you wish. And it's gorgeous. I think you're going to really appreciate it. So, quick discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, I just it occurs to me while both of you are talking that it seems like the path at some point gets in the way. Because if you're on the path, you're searching, and at what point, if you want to liberate and you want to awaken or to self-recognize or whatever, if you're on a path,
Alexis.
the path implies a separation. So I just wonder.
Yeah, it's our conception of path that can become an obstacle.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly what you said, that if it becomes a way of measuring ourselves or evaluating ourselves, then it's an obstacle. If it becomes a way of recognizing possibilities and helping us open ourselves, then it's not an obstacle. So it's in how we think of it. Personally, I've gone both ways at different times in my life, but it's, you're right. It is not helpful if it becomes a way of, further self-judgment.
And self-improvement.
So once you've self-recognized, once that happens, you're not on the path anymore, really. Your path has come to an end.
Ultimately, yes. I think that's what we're trying to say. I was trying to say a little bit last week that was kind of based on some teachings that I heard recently. That from the point, if you go back to that chapter, Enlightened Mind, Deluded Mind, from the point of view of deluded mind, there's a path because our understanding and our experience is all blocked and obscured by all of the, mistaken perceptions and habitual patterns and everything. And so the path is actually letting go of or seeing through, maybe seeing through would be a better way to put it, seeing through those. From the point of view of enlightened mind, which is, our awake nature, there's no path at all. Enlightened mind, nothing's added to it, nothing's taken away from it. It's just uncovered or revealed. So, it's again, kind of how we conceive of ourselves and what we're doing that makes path either into an obstacle or great guidance in terms of how we can open ourselves.
I think it really depends on your ability to recognize this as the goal and the home, the ground and the fruition. Your ability to realize that this is it. This is what's real. And as long as we think, I've got to get there, I've got to improve my understanding and myself, then we're on the path. And the highest teachings, Mahamudra and also Dzogchen, say that the notion of path can become an obstacle because it involves this idea, I'm not there. I am not there. And there is no I, really, just a figure of speech, you might say. And there is no there. It's just this, so they say it over and over again. Dzogchen teachings are really fierce about it. The Great Perfection teachings. Yeah, it's a path. There's an analogy for the path. A famous story, you probably heard it, about a mother who has, how many, is it 5 children, Michael?
Something like that, yeah.
And they've never met their father. And one day they just start clamoring. They want to meet their father. So they live down in a valley in a house. And the mother takes the children and they leave the valley. They climb up out of the valley and they go on this long journey for days and days and days, weeks, whatever. And then finally they come to a valley and they look down and there's a little house down in the bottom of the valley. And they go down and they enter the house. And they're exploring the house, the kids, and suddenly they open a door and there's their father. And they realize that this is the house that they left on starting the journey. And he was there all along. He was just in another room. And this is a metaphor for our path, our journey. Famous one. Mark, this will be the last one, and then we'll leave. Sorry, we're running late.
Hi. Thanks. Thank you so much, John and Michael and everybody. Yeah, I just, to me, the path, I think it's how you approach the path. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm on the path and I'm enjoying the path in the moment without any, without seeking the goal, but just enjoying the journey, is that problematic?
If you think, it only is if you think you're going somewhere.
Well, I'm enjoying the journey.
I mean, the more you enjoy the journey,
further than that, I'm enjoying the journey. I mean, I'm not quantifying on, 2 years from now, I'm going to hit the lottery of Buddhahood.
I think if you're really, really, really enjoying the journey, you're not even on a journey anymore.
All right. Okay, I'll take that.
What do you think, Michael?
I think it's fine to enjoy it. It's supposed to be joyful. It's just not getting caught up in trying to seek that the next time. That's where it becomes a problem. Trying to recreate a previous experience.
I'll close with one last story about Trungpa Rinpoche. Remember, I don't know if those of you may know that he had a heart son. His name was Ursel Tenzin. His original name was excuse me, what's his first name? Rich.
I'm Rich.
I'm Rich. Thomas Rich. And what happened was that Thomas Rich and another one of Rinpoche's close students named Ken Green were students of Swami Satchidananda. They ran the Los Angeles IYI, Integral Yoga Institute. And Rinpoche had met them in LA. And one day they showed up at his house here in Boulder, right down the canyon from where I'm living now. And they came in and made an appointment. They came in, they're dressed in whites, they got bare feet, they're got, sacks of incense or whatever hanging from their neck, long hair, beards. And they had come to invite Trungpa Rinpoche, this is 1971, to a spiritual version of Woodstock that a bunch of gurus were going to put on up in the Pacific Northwest. And it was going to be called the World Enlightenment Festival. And they wanted him to come. I mean, Swami Satchidananda was going to be there, Yogi Bhajan, all these people, Charles Berner. And so they asked him, they invited him to come, and they told him that the theme of this festival was that while different spiritual traditions may differ, in the end, and their paths may differ, in the end, they all lead to the same place. This enlightenment, or whatever it may be, I want to call it. He very politely, turned them down. He said that he was going to be busy, he had commitments, blah, 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 and they left. Afterwards, he expressed extreme distaste with this idea, the theme of this, the World Enlightenment Festival, because what he said is, yes, it may be true that all paths lead to the same goal at the end, perhaps, but it shows a tremendous lack of appreciation for the beauty and joy of the paths. And you have to, as a person who treads the path, learn to love the path and enjoy it and find beauty and happiness in it. So we felt it was too self-aggrandizing. So we ought to close, don't you think? I mean, we've gone on. This is such a deep subject.
Before we close,
Huh?
this book next week, can you give a 15-second why you chose it and something to look forward to in 14 days?
This is the Bodhicharyavatara. It is one of the great texts of Buddhism altogether. It's Mahayana, and it's about the path of the Bodhisattva, about compassion, about developing a mind that is attuned or inclined towards enlightenment, and it's written in verse. And the Padmakara translation is a very beautiful one. And I mean, it's hard to find a text that is more universally revered than this. And we'll go into that more and who Shantideva was, the person who wrote it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Oh yeah, the Bodhicharyavatara, it's called. So it's translated variously as entering the path of the Bodhisattva, the way of the Bodhisattva, entering the path to enlightenment, all of those.
And just to add to that, if I could just read this quote that's right on the jacket from the Dalai Lama. If I have any understanding of compassion and the practice of the Bodhisattva path, it is entirely on the basis of this text that I possess it.
Wow. Who's leading the chants? I forget. I'll put them up.
I was, so I can.
Okay, so we'll put them up and mute everybody. Tomorrow night we get cacophony. Oops. Hold on. Let me mute everybody. Michael, unmute yourself, please.
So we'll close by reciting the prayer for peace and dedicating the merit generated through our study and practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure inspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
Michael and John.
Thank you, Michael.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody. Thank you, Michael.
Bye. Thanks.
Good night.
So much.
Take care, everyone. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
John, I'll send the recording to you. right?
No,